All right, well, welcome to another episode of the Y Influence podcast. Today we got an awesome guest. Her name is Carrie, and she wrote a book, which I actually have right here,
Hey.
Building Brand Communities. And it's a really interesting book, actually. It's about how companies can utilize building communities for their brands and how it can add resiliency to their business and, from, short, giving them a longevity of the business. And for me, I've got a business that I've grown around 200,000 social followers for that, built a community there. And it's definitely helped tremendously during, the COVID situation and just, being able to make pivots to have that community sitting there. So it's really interesting what Carrie has put together in this book, and we'll be talking about some of that today. So first of all, thank you, Carrie, for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. So, before we get into this, I just want to maybe extract some stories. So, like you talked to a lot of businesses about building communities or optimizing their communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, aside from like the things that companies expect as results, do you have any examples of unattended consequences, like results that a company has gotten as a result of streamlining their community that they didn't expect to get?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with community building, it's almost always the unexpected consequences that people celebrate. You can set goals, and of course, if you reach your growth goals, getting to however many members in your community, that's great. But there'll be all these amazing consequences on the side of like people found jobs through one another. Their livelihoods have been supported by this community, or people have gotten married because they've met in this community. So I actually, prior to my consulting work now, I helped build a business called CMX, which is a community for community professionals, which is very meta. And through that work, building that community, of course, we connected, 20,000 community builders all over the world. And that was amazing. The community still exists. There's still a conference that happens. But in addition to that, there have been lifelong friendships formed out of that community. I met my partner through that community, who's working from home right across from me right now, which is kind of a trip when I think about that. It's been about 6 years or so since I met him. So, I mean, even that's a business community or like very business focused, but because people come together around shared passions and values and purpose, you end up finding that these really, really strong bonds get made as long as you create the conditions for people to actually feel comfortable talking to each other. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
So just real quickly before we dive into things, do you want to talk a little bit about your book and just maybe tell us, high level, elevator pitch kind of thing, what it's about?
Sure. Yeah. So this book, Building Brand Communities, that I co-wrote with Charles Vogel, it's, if anyone here knows about Charles Vogel's work, he's the author of The Art of Community, which is sort of a prequel to this book. It gives the principles that apply to all communities across all contexts. What are the things to be thinking about? And I had met Charles through my work building CMX, actually. And he said, we need to create this, but for organizations because they're doing it wrong. And, many of them are investing in just throwing money at problems or just throwing money at influencers a lot of times without actually building relationships with them and building something long lasting that is actually going to be positive for the world. So the point of the book is really to help organizations or solo founders, solopreneurs accomplish their goals by bringing the people important to them together, which is, of course, now more important than ever before. But it's been important for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's dive into that a little bit. So let's say you meet somebody that wants to build a community and they're literally starting from scratch. What would be some of like your biggest pieces of advice that you would tell someone like starting from scratch like that?
Yeah. So what I find is there's kind of two buckets of people. One bucket are the people who really are starting from scratch. Like they have no existing relationships so far. They are not even really sure what they want to build a community around. So we have to really drill down into that more. But much more often is the bucket of people who, like yourself, have many, many followers, have an audience, but are ready to take that to the next level and help that audience connect to one another. So it's not just you as the center point. It's you being able to then bring all those people together and help them meet each other. And then from there, go from creating an entire network of people. So that's when the magic serendipity stuff starts happening, when you're no longer the central node between everyone. I mean, you still are, but you're not the only node between everyone.
Right.
So first steps would be to identify which of those buckets you're in. And if you're in the first bucket, to think about your purpose. So think, why do I do what I do? What is it that drives me every day? And especially, are there early stories and memories in my life that connect me to that work too? I think storytelling is a huge part of community building. If you can tell a compelling story about your purpose and your values, then you can gather people. So get that really, really clear. If you're on the other side, it's more about taking the existing relationships that you have and deepening them if you need to, if they're really shallow right now, and actually like just getting to know people one-on-one. Or if you already have really deep existing relationships, then it's time to just try things, experiment. You know, it could be just experimenting with one virtual, I won't call it an event because I think there's so many virtual events happening right now. And
Right.
the bar is really low for really good ones. So a virtual convening or a virtual gathering, something that helps people to cross connections. Experiment with that. Experiment with, there's lots of community software out there. So it could be a Circle community, circle.io, I believe is the website, or, you know, Facebook groups is the one that many people use. I can go off on a whole tangent about why I don't recommend those. But yeah, so just experiment and have fun with it.
Okay. I like that. So,
Yeah.
You know, this podcast is called Why Influence for a reason, because we always, you know, buckle down to that. Knowing your why is really important, because then it gives you that motivation to push through getting started and to continue going.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go off the assumption that, you know, the person creating the community already has their purpose figured out. But I do like your advice for picking out the early stories in their life that relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that you know, already have their why figured out, like, how do you build those, you know, deepened relationships with the existing people that are already there, and you know, how do you sort of pull those moving pieces in a way that they can sort of interact with each other to create that stronger community?
Mm-hmm. So the first part is deepening the existing relationships. So if you feel like they're not deep already, one of the ways you can position this to actually get people on the phone or talking to you more deeply than you currently are talking to them is to send out some kind of a survey or screener survey. And this is very, very tactical, giving you very tactical information here.
Yeah.
To say, I'm thinking about launching whatever it is you're thinking about launching. Maybe it's an event series. I'm thinking about launching a Facebook group that will serve around this purpose. Do a really quick survey and then ask people if they'd be willing to chat with you more after filling out the survey. So I really use surveys as screeners for phone calls. Sort of like my magic, my magic back pocket trick, because most people have 5 minutes to fill out a survey if they care about your purpose. And from there, you get their consent to follow up with them and get to know them better. So you're not reaching out and asking for something out of the blue, basically. And it's about what are they going to get out of it too? Because if you're thinking about launching something and it's going to serve them, then they're going to want their voice to be heard about that. So then you get on the phone with them and actually dig deeper into their motivations, their hobbies, like what do they do outside of just the context of your work together, and just be a human, like be human with them. I've done it, I've trained people to do these interviews before they'll just go through a list of questions and they won't respond, to the person will, exactly. And it just feels like an interview. And it's the point of doing interviews for community building is about building relationships. It's not just getting answers. Of course, you're going to get a lot of information and insights, but so that's what to do if you personally need to deepen some of those relationships. But much more often, you already have a handful of relationships. You really only need 10 to get started. So bring those 10 people together around some purpose. And that purpose should be around, why you're influencing, and think about what each of those 10 people might want to get out of that interaction together. And really the community builder is the steward of this experience that allows people to connect around their purpose and make progress together. So start small. As Adrienne Marie Brown says, small is all. So I always go by that adage. It starts there.
I like
Always
that.
done.
Yeah, what I was thinking while you were explaining that is I host a weekly meetup for, aspiring influencers and influencers to just sort of network and learn from each other. So that's what I just got off the call with.
Mm.
And I had recently sent a survey out to that group, and I got 18 people to fill it out, and all 18, I think 17 out of 18 said that they'd be willing to have a phone call
That's great.
to discuss. So it's cool to
Yeah.
hear 10 is the minimum there.
Yes, you're good. You're past the minimum. You've done it. I mean, and they'll help you. You'll learn a lot in that process too of, like, we can't do it this way next time, or like, yeah, you just go.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for those who, I guess you're working a lot with existing organizations that have like other ways to pull resources in. So do you mind sharing like some tactics they use for that? Like, let's say they make this mission to create this, community and movement now, and they have like an email list. They have these other resources that they can just sort of market that to. Do you mind sharing some of those resources that they use? Because I think some of those probably would overlap with even what individuals have that, could be good ways to drive some initial momentum into a new community.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned email mailing lists. That's usually just a long list of people many of whom you don't know. So but email is something almost everyone uses. So that's obviously a major tool for promoting whatever community experience you're going to create. So if it's a gathering that you're having, or again, like a Facebook group, to promote what's going on in there. So people will use email a lot, social media. Obviously, you can say like, join us for this conversation. And I mean, it's all of the typical marketing tools that you would always use otherwise. But then there's a lot of virtual event software today. There's over 70 community platforms on the market, and expanding every single year. So the experiments really are endless. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Are you looking for other kinds of tools, anything in particular?
No, that's good. I think just, maybe strategies people can use to jumpstart some base level of people to show up to whatever their community and cause is.
Yeah. Email. I can't think of anything better for business. Let's say that. If you're really big on TikTok, like, use whichever platform it is that you are connecting with your customers, or I won't say customers for this particular audience, for the people important to you. Whatever platform it is that you're using, just go all in on that and use that as a platform to invite them to something else. So it's not just you putting out messages or putting out content. Now it's putting out content that is an invitation, and then having them come together for something synchronous, or asynchronous if you wanted to do like a chat or something like that. But the important thing is to meet people where they're at, and personal invitations, if at all possible. So you're talking about, you have 17 people who want to talk to you further. There's no reason why you should send a form email to all 17 of those people. It takes longer. It's inconvenient. And when you reach out to people personally, it makes a world of a difference, especially in the environment that we're currently in. People are hungry for connection, hungry for meaning. They want to feel seen and heard. And so creating and crafting personal invitations is the most effective way to get people to actually show up, not just sending an email blast. Of course, that's effective for numbers, but not for depth.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to envision in my head, like, what a typical invitation might look like. And, I've got some experience trying to, grow my community, and I'm finding that, just inviting isn't always the most effective, but maybe like summarizing, some of the biggest takeaways from the day, and then just saying this happened here, so that people can see, oh, there's value given. Maybe I should try to show up next time. So like, what kind of, words are people using, or wordsmithing, I guess, that you've seen?
So I'll walk you through an example right now. I actually have a client launching today, a
Oh,
community.
wow.
So we've been prepping that for 10 weeks. So if you're wondering how to set expectations, I've been doing this for a long time. It takes me 10 weeks to do this. So just give yourself lots of time to prep for a launch. So what we've done up to this point, we did the screener surveys, we did the interviews, we're still doing the interviews. The invitation looks like their community manager, their community leader, in this case, it would be you in your case, reaching out to 10 people who they think are the right people to be founding leaders. So they're then invited to get on the phone via email. They're invited to get on the phone to talk about this proposition and to, in that email, they're told, here are the things that we would expect from you. So they're expected to seed this is a forum that we're launching, seed the online forum with them, to give them feedback as they're getting started, and to show up to some live events and even potentially lead subgroups in the future. And then what they get out of it is they get thought leadership status. They get access to the internal team at the organization. And first, they're basically early adopters. They're seen as this influential group of early adopters. So that was compelling enough, and the relationships were already deep enough that out of the 10 invitations sent and the phone calls that were made, 9 people said yes. So, and that's what you should be aiming for. No less than 8 out of 10 if the ask is good. So then from there, we put a hold on everyone's calendars, and what that hold is for the actual launch, which is happening today. That's the day that they actually get a formal email invitation. And then this following Monday, we're actually doing a kickoff, just a 30-minute, like, here's how to use the software, here's how to use the forums, here are our goals. Is everyone excited? Everyone get to know each other, trade information. So it's going to be this really quick 30-minute sync, because these are all very, very busy people. And then they'll go off in their separate ways, and then we'll be checking in with them. So that's an example of how that can work. And really what you're trying to do is mitigate, you're trying to reduce uncertainty throughout the whole process, because when people get invitations that are not personal, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, what will I be expected to do there? Who will be there? What will I get out of this? So, and will I have to be in a breakout room on Zoom or not? I will have to say that one of my pet peeves is when people put people into breakout rooms in Zoom events and don't tell them ahead of time, because I'm an introvert and that's very like confronting for me. So yeah, just reducing uncertainty for that. And the more you can reduce uncertainty, the safer people will feel, the more likely they are to show up. And then when they show up, to actually participate.
Yeah, that's very cool. So you've got like the essentially 10 evangelists like right out the gate to help community to keep it engaged moving forward.
Yeah, which is really cool. One of them is actually a former NASCAR like major influencer in the NASCAR space, which I didn't realize. I mean, of course that's a thing. Of course it is, but nice. Yeah. So getting to know those people has been really fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you spoke briefly on platforms, and I've been struggling with that. I started with Slack, or I started with Discord, but I struggled with engagement. Then I moved to Slack, saw some limitations, went back to Discord, and just been trying to avoid Facebook mostly. And it sounds like for good reason, based off what you said earlier. So do you have any advice for, or just like different platforms that you've seen people use, and maybe how different platforms might fit certain situations?
Mm-hmm. So there are 3 types of platforms. The first are the ones that you're mentioning. So Slack, Discord, Facebook groups. I think you mentioned one other one. No, I'm forgetting. But those are the ones that are really easy to set up. They're generally, if not free, very low cost licenses. And then you have your really, really heavy, clunky, like I'm not going to say clunky. They're for large enterprises. So that's like your Salesforce, your Khoros, Lithium, those kinds of platforms, which are probably less relevant to this particular audience. And then you have ones that are sort of in between those 2 extremes. So Mighty Networks is an example. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's, again, like fairly low cost. I forget what it costs right now, but that one. There's also Circle I mentioned earlier. Disciple, tribe.so. There's a lot of these. They're probably going to cost you the same amount of that you would normally pay for, lead pages per month or ConvertKit or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can integrate, most of these have robust integrations with your ConvertKit, with MailChimp, so you can connect all of the data and things like that. I am really, really hesitant to say which platforms are my favorite because every use case is different. every use case is different. Every member type is different. Some really love communication where it's really lively and always on, and some people, and some groups of people, that's too distracting and they start to tune it out. But what I will say is that it's never the platform's fault if there's not engagement. Like it's a contributing factor, but it's never just the platform.
Yeah.
Because community management, community leadership requires a ton of just constant outreach, constantly checking in with people, putting out questions and ideas and trying new things. And if that's not done at a regular cadence or done in a way that's valuable to your members, then you're going to struggle with engagement no matter what platform you're on. Because they all essentially work the same way. I mean, they're going to ping people with emails. They're going to have notifications on the right sidebar. There's not anything that's really that different about any of these platforms. I've not seen anything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for because you deal a lot with large organizations and their communities tied to those. So are you typically in the higher and mid-range kind of communities, like you mentioned, or do people choose like maybe this one and this one, and then sort of have to manage multiple?
Yeah. So I'm all over the board because one of my launches earlier in the summer was with a small group of entrepreneurs who were launching a paid membership community. And they went with their own WordPress build, actually. So it's open source. So I work with clients like that, and then I work with Google. So it's like all across the board. So I'm forgetting your question now.
Well, I was asking on the side that you typically work with for organizations, but now that I think about it, I might want to shift gears towards, what the listeners here today might be most interested in. So if someone had like a small community of maybe a couple people versus like up to like maybe a couple hundred or maybe even a couple thousand, for their personal, brand and personal influence, I guess like, do you have any like examples of like how one platform might have applied to a situation? Maybe not like saying one is the best, but maybe an example of like how one might fit versus another.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of solo entrepreneurs will go with Facebook groups because that's where the eyeballs are. And I think that's why people stick with Facebook groups and why it's going to be really hard to get people, especially solopreneurs, entrepreneurs off, because doing the work of trying to get people to show up and even check your notifications is really difficult. And Facebook does that for you. So Facebook groups, obviously, Circle, again, I'll mention it. I also use it. So I'm not going to say it's my favorite, but it's the one that I use because I am a solo entrepreneur. I work with contractors and things like that. But I run my own community of community professionals now. And I just find it really, really easy, intuitive. I build 4 community builders and none of them have complained about the interface, which is a miracle. You have no idea how stressful it is to try to build a community platform for community builders. They're very, very picky. And it's also fairly low cost. It's like $39 a month. And they just launched, so they're still not in beta anymore, but I think they're just fresh out of beta. So, and I really like their team, and I'll just say all the awesome things about them. So yeah, that's a great example. And then, like I said, WordPress, like I think Divi does you can do some customizing of, people can have a profile and then that's connected to like forums that you can create with BuddyPress. Yeah. The low code and no code movement, which is like I don't know if does that mean anything to you when I say that?
Yeah, I've built a good handful of WordPress websites.
Yeah, so a lot of people are going with low code and no code solutions to community building right now. And so you can integrate just Discourse is another great example, actually. If you have a small community, especially of more technical people or people who some people prefer really basic, let me just say ugly interfaces. I'm not going to say like, just not my cup of tea. Some people really prefer that. It's like comfortable for them, like scientists really like their interfaces. And so that works really, really well for some people. And that's also open source, so very low cost and totally scalable. You can have a group of 5 people in there. You can have a group of 5 million people in there, and it will still work for you.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for those suggestions. And, for listeners here, you can start, researching some of those and see what fits best for what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you talk to an organization that already has like a Google maybe, or, someone that might have an established community that's doing a pretty good job, and they bring you in to sort of tweak and improve things. Like, what are some things that you see, or maybe the most common mistakes that communities have that are more established?
There's so many. Like, where do I begin? Number one would be leadership. That's the number one thing, that if it's not resolved, like, who is the leader of the community and why should people listen to them? If that's not clear and that person's not excited about the work that they're doing, I have never seen a community succeed. In my firsthand personal experience, I've never seen a community succeed when that's the case. On the flip side of that, I have seen incredibly passionate, caring people who just spend a lot of their emotional energy. There's a lot of emotional labor in community building. Make terrible platforms and terrible technology work because people just want to be around that person and the kinds of people that they attract. And that's another thing too for entrepreneurs to keep in mind, for influencers to keep in mind, is thinking not so much about your stated purpose, but also like, who are you and what are the feelings that people get when they're around you, whether digitally or physically. Emotions are contagious, even online. So if I bring people calm, for instance, then they're going to associate my community with a space where they know they can go and be calm. They can be cared for. They don't have to worry about taking care of other people for once in their day, which is a really important part of what I provide my community. And so those people who want that calm space bring that calm into the space with them, and then it just creates more and more and more calm. So the point of the community is not just, here's the work we get done together, but also when you want to feel calm in your day, check in with us. Like, we'll be here. Or if you just want to read the other things that we're talking about in there, or examples of work people are doing. So it's not just about the concrete things, but people don't usually join because they want to feel calm. They just discover that. That's how they feel later down the line. But I think a lot of influencers have that kind of magnetism about them for different reasons. They evoke different feelings in people. And so really leaning into that in any community experience that you steward is really important. I was supposed to talk about Google, but I got it.
No, that was very valuable. I mean, what I heard was, you talked about the importance of leadership. And if you don't have the right leader, or a passionate leader, or someone that's like, really driven at the top, it's never going to succeed.
Yeah.
And then, what are the feelings that people are going to get, like that magnetism, and what that leader has, it most likely will resonate into the vibe of the community, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. As a community builder and a leader, your job is really just to create this world. It's kind of like a world building thing, because you get to create the rules. You get to create, who gets to come in and who's not welcomed in for whatever reason. And your job is to maintain that special space for people. So it's a lot of power.
Yeah.
It's an incredible gift. Yeah.
Interesting. So speaking on that, then, talking about, you have a little bit of control and like who's joining. I think part of that control is, given by just saying what the community is, because then if someone's not interested in that topic, they may not join it. But, what are some advice that you have seen, that if someone's like, I want to build this community, to make sure that the person stays like focused and has that like, barrier that should be in the way, to make sure that the community is built the right way?
Yeah. So this comes down to values and a really clear purpose statement, which I have a when I think about purpose statements, you think about the who do you want to be there and what are their values? And then the what are you going to actually do together? And then the why should anyone care? And then within that purpose, then you could accomplish that purpose in infinite ways. But it's like, what are the values that we are going to accomplish that purpose with? You know, because if I say I want to, my purpose is to build the biggest company in the world. My values could be like money and
Right.
and security and things like that. Versus my values could be connection and mutual care and health. It would be a totally different, largest company in the world, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many resources out there that boil down, you know, what are some of the most common values, and going through exercises to determine what those are for you is really important. I use Brene Brown, Dare to Lead. Her book has a whole list of values in it. That's really, really, really comprehensive and valuable. I've added some to it over the years, but that's a great place to start. And you just go through the list and you say, these are my values. Great, check, check, check. And then you cross out all the ones that aren't valuable to you. And then Brene insists that you reduce it to 3, or I think it's 2 or 3, which is, it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. But if you do that, then all of the decisions about who's allowed in and who is not allowed in and what behaviors are encouraged here and which ones are not encouraged becomes really, really easy. It's almost like it just naturally, organically can then happen because you know your values. So do that first before deciding, like, here are the rules.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you know, as we dive into this, obviously it makes sense why there's so much pre-work involved with launching a community. And
yes,
you said you've been spending
you get
months.
it. Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah, it's a lot.
You have all the interviews that you're doing. You know, it's the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's not an email marketing campaign or something you just do once. It's sort of like architecting your email for the very first time takes you a really long time. Usually, like setting it all up takes you at least a couple weeks to do it really, really properly. So,
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, do you mind if we talk a little bit about your story, since you know, you've created a community yourself, you've written a book, and you're getting your voice out there.
Yeah.
So, like, I guess I want to figure out, like, where it's started for you, like, you know, where you like either started building community in a way that's larger than yourself, or started sharing in a way that is, you know, in a like a leveraged capacity. Like, when did that sort of start for you?
So I've always built community since I was really young, without calling them that, of course. They were clubs, or like, you know, I would just start little games that people would come and play on the school playground. But it really wasn't until high school that I really desperately needed community and couldn't find it. And I wasn't bullied necessarily. I was really invisible growing up, like just really quiet and almost to the point where people were concerned about me. I was just really, really shy. And so I had friends, but I didn't really like let them in to get to know me very well. And, you know, I had a lot of family things going on in the background. And that's when I discovered, right around when I was 14, 15, my dad worked in tech. He had been a tech reporter. And so we had computers in our home from a very early age, like really weird computers.
Yeah,
and I had an MP3 player, like that was like this big once. I brought it to school and I thought I was the coolest person ever. So anyway, he handed me down the family laptop, or the family giant computer, and he let me put it in my bedroom. And at that point, then I realized, oh my gosh, the computer is not just for playing The Sims and games. Like, yes, it's that too, but also there's people here. And I had been on AIM chat rooms before, and those were kind of weird and dicey at different times.
I remember that.
But I discovered purposeful forums. And for me, the thing that connected me to people online was music. And so I joined a bunch of music forums when I was in high school. And all of a sudden I realized, like, there were all these teenagers all over the world, you know, like from the Philippines to New York to London to Singapore to me in Burlingame, California. And we had never met each other, and yet we were talking about, you know, like our days, what had happened bad at school that day, or breakups, or, you know, who are we, and like, what is my sexuality, like things like this, with people just on the internet. And I realized at that point that I could be known. And that was really the first time I discovered it was safe to be known, and it felt safe because of the screen, frankly. And then I was able to bring that into my offline world. So I started to open up more and more with my friends around me. And I became a moderator of that community and stewarded it for several years. But yeah, that's sort of the origin of it all. And that's why I've always loved online communities specifically. That's always been my bread and butter.
Yeah. So you were 14, 15, you started, you know, going to these online communities and then opening up, and then that sort of, you know, carried over into the real world, but you found like a tribe that you could, you know, associate to online.
Yeah. And I, like 15-year-old me would be like, who are you? Like, what is this? I never would have been on a live stream at that point. I mean, didn't exist, but yeah, definitely.
Wow.
And that's what I think is possible to create for anyone. And those music forums I was part of course, we all bought concert tickets. We all, you know, would show up to album signings and things like that. Like, we were really loyal to these musicians for hosting the spaces, even though they were never in them. It was about who they brought together and who they attracted.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So when did that, you know, sort of journey evolve into like how it's become like where you are today, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there was a big lapse, I would say, in my internet socializing from college, when I really started to come out of my shell and figure out who I was, till my early career. And I graduated in the recession, and I thought I was going to work in book publishing. Thank gosh that didn't happen. I love books, but it just wasn't the job for me. And I went and traveled to New Zealand after I graduated, and all the community that I was part of during that time and during college was all face-to-face community. And especially when I got to New Zealand, my friend who I traveled with, we hitchhiked all over New Zealand. Like, someone just told us, we got off of a ferry on the North Island, and someone said, "You don't need a car, just hitchhike." And so we hitchhiked for an entire year.
Wow.
Like, two of us were, you know, 21 years old.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And there was a couple of times where I definitely didn't feel safe. That's a different story for a different time. But for the most part, people were so kind, so friendly, and they were just, I got in the car once with somebody, a mom and her son was going through flashcards and testing for an exam that he was about to take, and he was all nervous, and we were like quizzing him in the back seat. So anyway, that was sort of this big break that I took. And then I got into working in tech, and I didn't realize what I was doing in tech was building a community. So there was a whole network of academics. I was building an academic community. And it turned out that they were, in order for them to succeed, they needed to be connected to one another. So we actually used, I think it was not Google Groups, but it's dead now, Google Plus.
Yeah, Google.
We used Google Plus. That was what we used. And then we moved to LinkedIn groups when they were less dead also.
Yeah, more functional.
Yeah. And so I was just experimenting at that point. And then I just really fell in love with it and found a whole group. There was a whole community of community professionals, found them, started leading meetups in San Francisco. And here I am. So yeah.
Right. So, and then the San Francisco meetups was like the beginning of your community of community builders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sort of built up into what that is today.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm no longer in San Francisco. I went from San Francisco to Seattle. When in Seattle, I also hosted meetups. So just basically everywhere I went, I just hosted meetups. Because the profession of community building is still nascent, but it was really, there was like, 200 people in this meetup group originally. And so we all really needed each other. We were really leaning on each other for like, how do we figure out this internet socializing thing? So there are people from Pinterest and Airbnb and Lyft and all these other big up and coming startups at the time that are now IPO'd, a lot of them. So yeah.
Yeah, so you've gone through that. You found from a young age that community is like so important, and you've always just gravitated towards that. And then you ended up in a position where you're building communities for community builders, and then you build this expertise in this space, and now you're consulting for businesses, and then you end up writing a book on it.
Yeah. And I met my partner. Just crazy.
Right.
My whole life. It's like my whole life. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So, I guess let's see where we're gonna dive into here next. So, what's the future look like for community building? Whether it's people that you're working with or your personal community or what you're seeing in the space. There's like so many new technologies coming out. There's so many movement in the space. Like, what do you like? What's your opinion on where the future's headed for the whole community thing?
I think that we're going to go down two roads. This is my theory right now. There's the road of Parler and communities like that where freedom of speech, the First Amendment rights are held above safety. And that's legal and totally fine to do in the US right now. And I'm also speaking of this also from a very US based perspective. And so,
right.
Yeah. This is a problem in other countries as well. I was just talking with someone who's Danish. They were saying there's issues there, and Australia is facing issues, and India. So there's that. There are going to be spaces of hate and distrust and misinformation that's going to keep happening. And right now, the only way we know to mitigate it is through a combination of artificial intelligence, which is not very good at keeping that tamped down right now, and humans. So community managers or community moderators. And what's going to happen if that work doesn't get properly compensated and those community managers don't get the mental health care that they need and things like that, we're looking at a whole generation of people deeply traumatized. Yeah. So it's that's not good. That's really that's the dark shadow side. And I hope that we can divert some of that to the other path that I see, which is where more people are going to be more and more interested and feel more and more empowered to lead online communities than ever before, especially because of the pandemic and everything that's happening. We've realized that this has been available to us the whole time. Everyone's been poo-pooing it for years. I know, because I've been doing this for a long time. And all of a sudden, all these people who were like, face-to-face is always going to be better than online community building, were coming to me being like, please help me. And it's not that it's better or worse. There's different positives and negatives. So as more and more people are investing the resources, time, energy, emotional labor into building these spaces where we can listen to each other, where harm might be done, but it will be, we'll be able to resolve that harm and maybe heal some of that trauma that's been created in these other spaces. If we can create like a groundswell of those places online, then we have the potential to divert away from this other path. And so that's really why I'm driven to do what I do, because if I can teach people these principles and then they practice them, every person that puts this into practice in their community is impacting untold numbers of people in those people's communities, and then so on and so forth. And a lot of people learn by example too. So I also think it's really important that I lead communities so that people can follow my example and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the level of impact that you're doing, you may not always get the credibility for it because it may be collateral damage, but
you don't.
the reach of the impact that you're doing is tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do this for credit. I gave that up a long time ago.
That's
but yeah, I hear stories every so often of like I was working on building the Elizabeth Warren campaign community before she had dropped out of the election. And it turned out a lot of people working for the Elizabeth Warren community went on to work for the Biden community. And so no matter what your politics are, your political beliefs are, the campaign that they ran and all that was just incredible.
Yeah.
And so I found out that they were using the book to
wow.
run digital campaign efforts, because I had worked with this incredible digital strategist on the Warren campaign. She had sent the book to the Biden campaign. So
that's amazing.
yeah.
Just for listeners here today, when I asked Carrie to come on here and share, she sort of questioned a little bit if she's an influencer herself. But as we're talking here, it's definitely clear that you've made tremendous impact already, and there's so much more to come. So just thank you for what you're contributing to the world here.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. Yeah. Appreciate that.
So one last question regarding the future. Similar to just the in-person stuff, there's like all these online summits happening now. Like, do you see that there'll be like a bunch of online summits and then maybe like an annual conference, or like what's like the I guess the ratio, or like how things might pan out? Because I know that with so much virtual now and everyone's staring at a screen, I know I like being in person and engaging. Obviously, right now with COVID, you can't, but there's probably some blend there. But I'm just curious, since you're immersed in the space, like what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, I miss it too. I really, really miss. I miss conferences, which are most of the time I'm like, can't wait to go back to my hotel room when I'm at them. Introvert again. I think people are building the infrastructure right now. The people who are doing this, they're particularly well suited for when hopefully we can go back out in the world in the next year and a half and interact in person again, to have the in-person interactions. Maybe it's a monthly meetup, maybe it's an annual conference, and then continue those relationship building endeavors online, because that's actually the incredible thing that the online community helps people do, is they have these incredible synchronous in-person live experiences. They spark these relationships. And sometimes you will walk away from a conference or a gathering and have one or two people that you met, or a handful of people that you met, who you go on to stay in touch with. But a lot of times you lose touch with those people, or with you'll just kind of forget to follow up, whatever it might be, or you'll have seen someone there and then you can follow up with them online. And so the online community helps extend out that relationship building and creates a space and a container for it. So I am hoping, I can only work with so many people at once. A course I'm teaching is about building engagement in online communities. So I'm hoping that it works for them too. But I work with only a handful of clients every year, and I'm hoping that people are outside of my clients doing this as well and creating the infrastructure they need so that they can do that when we're back in person. Because there will be, for sure, a pendulum swing. That's going to, without a doubt, that's going to be a thing. But we also now all have habits around digital connection that we didn't have before, which I'm really excited about. So I think there'll be things that we kind of like about it, and things that I've really loved about online communities for a long time. People, I think, will continue to use them once this pendulum swing kind of evens out a little bit.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
So before I open the floor to ask what the best way is for people to engage with you or learn more, knowing that we have a lot of influencers that have their own communities or working to build their own communities, do you have any last words that you'd like to share with those listeners here today?
I would say just know that however long you think it's going to take you to build this incredible, deeply engaged, self-managing community, times that by 6 online, and be patient, because every small action that you take in community building matters. Just like building a relationship, you can't fast track that. If you try to fast track and engineer building really deep relationships really quickly, you might actually be a manipulative jerk. So just be patient through the process, and also remember that this is the work that the world needs. We're in the middle of a loneliness epidemic, especially for young people today. Suicide rates are on the rise. This is something deeply, deeply needed. We are hungry for meaningful connection and purpose. And I know when I say that, it sounds kind of like, oh yeah, everyone wants connection and community. But I mean that in like a very tangible way. Like we need people around us all the time. Like I'm not going to be able to do my life alone. And so showing up for each other and caring for each other mutually that's all of our work.
Awesome. Well, thanks for those words of wisdom. It's another reassurance that what you're doing is making a difference. I mean, there's so many people out there that need that community for so many reasons.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'll have a link in the description to buy this book. It's got a ton of information there. It's definitely relevant to individuals, not just corporations. So, it's a very cheap way to get a ton of knowledge. So definitely encourage getting that.
It's true.
But what's the best way someone can reach out to you? Maybe if they got value today, they want to say thank you. Maybe how they can reach out, or you talked about an online course, so let us know how we can follow up with you.
Yeah, the best way to reach me right now is probably through Instagram, and I'm just at Carrie Melissa Jones on Instagram. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm at CareMJO on Twitter, or just send me an email. I'm c@carriemelissajones.com. The online course, if you sign up for my email list on my website or on Instagram, you will get notification when it's open again. It's right now I'm in the pilot course, so I'm learning and improving, and I will be reopening it in January 2021. So be enrolling new students.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to come on and share today. It's been amazing hearing the advice as well as your story with all this community building stuff.
Yeah, this was really fun, and I wish you and all of your listeners all the luck and all of the patience with yourselves in the world. Much respect to you.
And maybe sometime in the future we could do a follow up on how your journey and your impact is going, because I think you're going places here.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Just real quick before I let you go, because I'm on a journey myself trying to self improve. I'm an introverted communicator and things like that. Just curious if you have any advice or any feedback for how this conversation went, or the podcast, your experiences interacting with me, just any kind of feedback, constructive or positive, anyway.
I mean, I've been on a number of podcasts about the book, and this is one of my favorite conversations that I've had so far. So you've asked really insightful questions, and I really appreciate that. Not just asking the typical boring questions. So I appreciate that. And there was also a lot of lead up to it. I talk a lot about onboarding and welcoming, and the process of initiating relationships is really, really key. And I think you're doing a good job of that right now. You could probably amplify it like 10%, and then you'd be like rocket power.
Nice. All right. I'll take that into consideration. Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. We had a comment come in from James. Thanks, Carrie. This was amazing.
You're welcome, James.
This was amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're out of time here, but thank you so much, Carrie, for tuning in. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this episode in its entirety. If you're looking to grow your influence, then on top of listening to these episodes, you can join our weekly meetup where we get together and network. There's details on our website, and I'll make sure to link everything in the description so you can follow Carrie on Twitter and Instagram, subscribe to her newsletter, get notified of her course, and see you in the next episode then.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.